There's 2 new FTC DECODE world records in the same week. Let's take a look at how that strategy might apply to your robot. So that as it bounces out, it can bounce off this section or this section before coming in. Because if you are aiming too high, I'm Coach Pratt, and I've been teaching robotics design for over a decade now, and I've mentored FTC teams to winning national championships and multiple Inspire awards. And today we're talking a lot about shooter design and flywheel design when it comes to the FTC DECODE season. And then we're also going to take a look at 2 of the newest world records that are close to breaking 500 points. First up, let's jump into here talking about some different shooter designs. I wanted to show off Tarpon Robotics, Golden Fish 13093. I think it's interesting taking a look at some of these robots and seeing how successful they've been. And another one of those things that we continue to see this season is the idea of the spindexer versus a higher throughput. And you've got a sort of spindexing design here, which I think is pretty successful for a lot of teams and where things are going. I think that one of the things that's going to be really critical with these designs to be able to improve a design that might have a slightly tilted indexer is really focusing on higher throughput. So rather than using a servo to be able to drive your spindexer, how can you get higher throughput here, perhaps with a motor, perhaps with, because of, see, when this one is the same kicking position that moves all the way. So how can you get more throughput coming through that system? Because as we're seeing, high throughput really seems to be where things are going. And at this point, I'm not seeing too many teams having catapult designs. What I am seeing is I'm seeing a lot of flywheel launcher designs. And I'm releasing a new tutorial next week that I just finished filming on about tuning PIDF control for your flywheel, and it goes into how you can do custom PIDF tuning and also goes into what's the correct gear ratio. So I think a lot of teams are running the wrong gear ratio for their flywheel. So that would be worthwhile to take a look. It should be dropping next Wednesday as well. Or if you're a member of my channel, then you can get access to it a little bit sooner. Taking a look here, there are 2 teams, 15989 and 15991, that have very similar designs. I thought this one was really unique because it's got a triple turret and a triple hooded turret at that. Which I think is really interesting. And they've got some video here of it actually being able to rotate all 3 at the same time, which I think is really slick. I'm curious to see how well this performs. And as far as I'm aware, it did perform pretty well in their matches as well. Really cool to see these different pieces of engineering going on. Continuing on the topic of flywheel is the importance of speed up time, spin up time. For example, we can see just how long it takes this flywheel to get up to speed. This flywheel takes almost 3 full seconds to start from dead stop to full. In some of my testing, I'd be able to go from about 1 1/4 second to down to about under of a quarter of a second in just spin up time with some proper gear ratios and some properly masked flywheels to still have high throughput on that. So make sure you take a look. But I want to talk here with 24018, not because I want to talk about the low spin up time, but I do want to talk about where it is that they're aiming for that target and where teams, I think, should be aiming on that target as well. And this is something that we're really going to take a look at in that world record matches as well coming up, is I'm seeing teams that are trying to aim low and on the left side of this having far more success, because what ends up happening is the ball comes in, bounces off this corner, bounces off this corner, bounces off this corner, and then ends up falling in. And it's far less likely for the ball to fall out at that point as well. We've got team 12599 with the same similar kind of deal where it is they decide to end up launching. You can see they're deciding to launch a little bit lower here, and it ends up doing a bit of a double bounce. In this case, just a single bounce and back in. So really making sure that you're trying to hit a little bit lower on that target as it comes in, so that as it bounces out, it can bounce off this section or this section before coming in. Because if you are aiming too high and you have a lot of backspin on the ball, what ends up happening is sometimes those artifacts end up launching out of the goal, and that's definitely not what you want. And we're really going to see this when it starts to take a look at some of these world record championships, particularly the Romanian world record match, taking a look at where these teams are starting to fire. So I really do think that sitting in that bottom left section or the bottom right, respectively, of that goal really is the place that you should be aiming for in that target. And we've been seeing it a lot this season as well. First up, we've got the current 2nd place world record from Velocity Robotics, which is, I believe velocity is 21087 and 15996. So the team to watch here is the Blue Alliance. This was from the Romania Championships as well. And let's take a look, particularly in this drop-down menu here, about where it is that we are seeing the balls fire in. So again, let's take a look at the Blue Alliance, and we can see that as it is that they are firing in some of these artifacts, it's really kind of focusing on that left side of that field. So we're coming into the autonomous. As well on the autonomous, one of the really important things that a lot of teams and some of these really high championship teams and these really high world records just really prioritizing that throughput. Pattern really does seem to be thrown out the window for a good chunk of this. And we can see that because pattern being thrown out, you have 90 points and just enough to be able to get those points in. Hitting all those ranking points, it's still yet to be seen whether that's going to be critical when it comes up to leading yourself into that match. And First still has not released what the new ranking points are going to be needed for that pattern. I suspect it will be slightly higher than you could achieve with just randomness inside of that shot for that pattern. But as we can see here, for the most part, what really does end up happening is it is high throughput that ends up winning a lot of these matches. And with that high throughput is the ability to get quickly across the field and its ability to quickly release those artifacts. And we're seeing a lot all season, and the Blue Alliance is really starting to run away here with this qualification in that they are quickly able to move across that field and then quickly able to unload their artifacts as well from both teams. And from this really high view here, we can actually get a really good shot of where it is you should be aiming those artifacts. So again, if we go back for these last few seconds, because I think this is a really good view here, I want you to take a look at, for the most part, when the blue, come on, where's my, there it is. For the most part, when the Blue Alliance is firing in, they're trying to fire in right here, and the Red Alliance is trying to fire in there. And you can see that when artifacts end up hitting a spot that is different from those, they do have a higher likelihood of them actually ended up launching out. So watching the Blue Alliance here, we can see the 6 volleys all end up being pretty successful, moving themselves all the way in. Red Alliance, again, all 6 volleying in when they're shooting into that back left-hand corner, far more likely. And we can see that when they hit directly in that middle, they're also likely for them to start dropping out. So some seriously impressive play here out of both teams. And let's take a look at the last world rec here. The team here to watch is team 14270 and 20265 on the Red Alliance. So let's take a look at their autonomous. And again, this is the finals match. So for the most part, the section that doesn't really matter too much is getting those pattern points anymore. So effectively, every single volley that the Red Alliance is doing, they're opening up that gate. And that is going to be particularly important when we start getting to these really, really high level matches of play to be able to effectively open up that gate every single time. And it looks like they prioritize opening up that gate so much so even at the very end, where they even just forego getting off of that leave match to be able to get a few more artifacts in there as well. And they end up scoring 2 of those as overflow. So 104 points on that, 108 points for that on the autonomous. It's really impressive scoring. And we see that for the most part, it is that high velocity, it is that high, quick movement across the field is really critical. Getting a lot of weight off of your robot. We can see that a lot of these teams have some relatively thin aluminum chassis on the side of them. We'll see if any sort of disconnects start to happen, if a little more defense starts to be played. We can see that when we look at the Blue Alliance versus the Red Alliance, there's not really a lot of defense being played between these teams, despite there being some opportunities for defense to happen. And we do see a little bit back there in the far triangle tends to have a lot more defense being played, but in the close triangle, there's a lot less defense that ends up being played between the teams, because these teams have such high cycle rates that it's hard for them to even get in the way to be able to connect with them. So at the end of the day, if you end up with a match where you don't have really high defense, particularly in those front robots, what ends up happening is the team that can move faster and launch faster ends up winning. I mean, that seems like a bit of a clear, obvious point, but reducing some of that weight, finding the ideal gear ratio for your drivetrain, particularly for your specific weight, is a really important thing. As I talk about that, I'd be curious if you would be interested in me doing a little more of a deep dive on trying to find gear ratios that make the most sense for specific weights on robots and to be able to have the most efficient as well as the most power for that. Let me know in the comments if you'd like me to do a tutorial on that when it comes to these drivetrains. We start looking at these points though. again, just kind of forgoing those pattern points when it comes to those final 17 seconds, because for the most part, just getting in enough is really critical. And in the last 10 seconds of the match, perhaps not opening up the gate anymore inside those. And we're even seeing here with the park, having a really high park doesn't even add that much extra points to the team. So we can see that I believe they ended up missing that double park in the end here. So we can see that 2201 is coming up for that lift. Quite a fast lift. My guess is that that team also is using a power takeoff system that Romania is quite famous in. I've got a few videos down below on using a power takeoff system for you to lift up your robot using some linear slides as well. And then just how quickly one of these teams could be able to come in and do that parking. And I don't believe they end up getting the full park in there, at least in my opinion, looking at those last 0 seconds. We'll take a look at the point score as it comes forward. And to my surprise, they actually do end up getting that full basing point. I am surprised, given that at 0 seconds they were still moving. But perhaps that's a hard one for it to end up actually qualifying on. In any case, some super impressive work here out of both of these teams. I'm curious your thoughts on where you think things are going to be going when it comes to the World Championships and Premier events, and just how important you think that those pattern points are going to be for selecting teams and which teams end up being captains based on those ranking points. Let me know in the comments down below. If you have an interesting match or an interesting robot you'd like me to take a look at on the next FTC Fridays, I have a Google form you can submit down below in the description. And as always, best of luck out there next season.